Hello and welcome to the second Grand New Party Pack Zoom call. I'm Shane Trejo here with 5th CDRC Chair John Smith and State Rep James DeSana. We're going to talk today about corruption in Lansing. If anyone wants to give a question, everyone is muted, but just put your hand up, raise your hand, and then after we kind of go through our presentation, then we'll allow questions at the end of the presentation. And you can also put questions in the meeting chat as well if you prefer that, and we will address that as well. But so let's get right into it. Representative DeSana, you are a freshman rep, so just a handful of months up there in Lansing. And you talk a little bit about what you've experienced up until this point, and what you were expecting from Lansing, and what you've received from the culture and the leadership and everything there.
Sure, absolutely, Shane. Thanks first for having me on today. I'm happy to be here. For everyone who doesn't know me, I'm Jim DeSana. I represent Taylor, Romulus, New Boston, Huron Township, Carlton, Ash Township, Frenchtown Township, and a part of Monroe. I am 100% down the line of faith and family constitutional conservative. As many of you know, I'm a member of the Freedom Caucus, and I won in a 50-50 district. And I did not compromise my values, compromise my principles. I campaigned as a conservative 50-50 district, and I unseated the only Democrat. I was the only one to unseat a Democrat Republican in the last election cycle, an incumbent Democrat. So in answer to Shane's question, there's a near constant drumbeat of discussion in our caucus that we need to protect the vulnerable members and that represent these 50-50 seats. I want to state here that I believe that to win back Michigan in the hearts and minds of working families and independent-minded voters, we have to be the party of much smaller government, lower taxes, less regulation, less intrusion into people's lives while protecting our sacred rights. And that's the kind of government we want. So here we are in May of 2023 trying to fight this uphill battle, keeping in mind that the Michigan Dems, I'm sure you all know, are unleashing 40 years of pent-up frustration that somehow they feel that they've been treated unfairly and blocked from arguing their causes by Republican majorities. And to a certain extent, that's true. I will say, though, that we have never seen anything like what is occurring right now. Please keep in mind also that our federal government and our state government have become very intertwined. Our federal government has become the big enabler, printing money like there's no tomorrow and enabling our state's leaders to act like money is no object. But the day of reckoning will soon be here, and I'm sure many of you believe that the day of reckoning has long passed by. So here in our state legislature, and I will speak specifically to the House, so we're suffering the effects of approximately 10 liberal members of our caucus that will vote with the Democrats quite frequently. Although we've been sticking together a bit more the past few weeks, as some of our members have finally realized how radical the agenda is of our Democrat colleagues. So I came in fully expecting that the Democrats would enact their agenda and they would enact it in short order. I did not expect that we would have as many Republicans cooperating and going along with them. As you all know, the Dems can outvote us 56-54 on every and bill that they want to pass. The tricky part for the Dems is they often have a hard time getting all 56 of their members in attendance. The highly unpleasant part of this for Republicans is that we have had members join with the Democrats on almost every crucial vote we've taken. So the governor and the Dems will state that much of what we've done is bipartisan, and they are stating that now. So let me say, everything that is happening, I fully expected. I'm really not surprised by much of this. I fully expected this coming in. Our state legislature is infected with systemic corruption. It affects both parties, and neither party can claim the high ground rate. And you might say, well, Jim, what is this? How does this system work? So let me start off by saying that not everyone is intentionally participating in this. Some are unwitting participants. that have poor situational awareness. Others believe that this is the hand we've been dealt with, and we just have to make the most out of it and in as fair of a manner as possible. I reject this latter argument as an utter failure that has led us to where we are today. There are many in our leadership who do not want any of this brought out to the public. Please allow me a second to lay out some of the arguments as to what practices enable this corruption. So, the speaker election process, as many of you know, I got up on day one and said I would not vote for Speaker Joe Tate. And I wondered if I would be the only one. Thankfully, I wasn't. There were 7 other members along with me that voted against Tate. And for that, we were punished. We got literally no committee assignments. And the few of us that did get a committee assignment, it was a so-called shadow committee that doesn't take up any legislative action or have any votes. Also, a big part of our flawed process is our leadership election process. It's done 36 hours after the election. So Tuesday night, we find out we're elected sometime at 3 a.m. for me. And by Thursday morning, 9 a.m., we're in Lansing electing our leadership. And we don't know anybody. Maybe we've met them in the campaign process, but we truly don't know them. We don't know their values. We don't know how they'll act. The next thing is self-aggrandizement through leadership status. And this is a big problem. And I'll go through a litany of things that you all probably are aware of because they've been in the news. The next one is undue conflicts for any members opposing votes of caucus leaders. So, for instance, a gun control vote. If you oppose the leader who voted for the gun control, you are singled out and you are a target for undue criticism. Committee assignments, which I mentioned, and how they are negotiated. The conservatives in the caucus get no committees. So, not to say that the committee process is perfect, but we as conservatives have been ostracized in the caucus. Again, using leadership positions to raise funds that prevent freedom and liberty conservatives from garnering support and ultimately getting other candidates through the primary over freedom and liberty, America First type candidates. Another one is contractors and vendors within the employ of HRCC. And HRCC is our campaign committee that we raise funds for to help elect Republican majorities in the House of Representatives. The Senate has a similar organization. So contractors and vendors within the employ of the HRCC with heavy conflictual relationships with members of the legislature, within the legislature and within HRCC. And then the biggest one, and this is the number one thing, and I'll go over this a little more in depth. A total lack of legislative staff job security at the hands of the speaker and an atmosphere of fear among the staff that tough decisions by their legislator boss or fighting too hard for a position could result in the staff members being fired. So in other words, if we go too hard on our conservative values, our leader will say, hey, be careful, your staff could be fired. Speaker Tate could fire your staff. Or your leader could go to Speaker Tate and tell them to fire your staff. It doesn't happen very often, but the threat, my staff has come to me several times and said, hey, boss, man, I don't know if you should do this. They could fire our staff. They can have you taken out of your office. And so all these things are kind of threats that leadership will hold over you to kind of beat you down from holding too conservative of a position or fighting too hard for your values. Now, how has this manifested itself over the last, let's say, 15 years in the state legislature? Well, all of you have probably followed the legacy of our speakers of the House caucus leaders in the House. Rick Johnson, I'm sure many of you saw last week, pled guilty to $110,000 in bribes and will serve some time in prison. He used his position to garner a state position on the marijuana board and then started taking bribes. He was open for business. And if all of us believe that those were the first bribes that Rick took, I don't know, that's pretty naive. Then we've got the Lee Chatfield situation. Everybody in the House will tell you that they knew what was going on when Lee Chatfield was corrupt. No one did anything about it. No one would speak up. No one would say, hey, Lee Chatfield needs to be removed as speaker. So as a result, we have another black mark on our Republican brand in Lee Chatfield. Lee Chatfield has fled the state. He's living out of state right now. Who knows what the status of all that is, but there's all kinds of different allegations, criminal, and you can look up Lee Chatfield and you'll see all the information. And just recently, our speaker, Jason Wentworth, many of you probably have followed the story of Faye Baydoun having a shadow nonprofit and getting $20 million from the state treasury for her nonprofit, Global Interlink, to bring foreign corporations to Michigan, to help bring foreign corporations to Michigan. She didn't have a business. She didn't have staff. It was just her. And Jason Wentworth arranged for a grant through your dollars for $20 million for Faye Baydoun. And if you don't know who Faye Baydoun is, look it up. She's a big Democrat staffer. She's been part of the Democrat National Committee, Democrat State Committee. She's a big Governor Whitmer friend, and she's a Democrat. And Jason Wentworth tried to deny that he had anything to do with the grant, but it's obvious. Dems saw it's his sponsorship, and the Dems said clearly he sponsored the grant. So we've got a legacy of corruption, and we've got our hands full right now in trying to repair our Republican brand. I'm sure the grassroots out there have to be saying, my gosh, give me a reason to vote for Republicans. You guys are all either going to jail or finding money in the treasury for corrupt people. How in the world is electing you going to help us get to a smaller government and back to freedom and liberty in the state of Michigan? And I have a hard time, when they say that, I'm like, yeah, that's our legacy. How do we elect leaders that truly reflect what we feel and what the state wants? So that's where the systemic corruption lies. And I want to leave some time for questions. But what I will say in our caucus, so we pray an invocation before every session. And we trade off between the Democrats and the Republicans. We go alphabetical. And so everybody gets a chance to pray to open the session. And I suddenly realized that we were missing the prayer as Republicans, and we were in caucus. And we had missed 2 or 3 days in a row. And I said, wait a second. The Dems are in there praying to an empty room of Republicans. It looks really bad. And I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going in to pray the invocation, regardless of who's praying. So out of respect, I let my chair, Ken Borton, know that I was going in to pray the invocation. And next thing you know, I was pretty much attacked unfairly, walked up to by our minority leader, Matt Hall, and said, what's wrong with you? And I said, what do you mean, what's wrong with me? And he says, what's wrong with you? Are you leading a caucus walkout? And I said, no. I said, I'm going in to pray. And he said, well, we can't go in and do that. It's going to take like 10 minutes. It'll disrupt our caucus. And it's really not something we can do. So I said, listen, I'm going in to pray. Whoever wants to follow me out there, that's their own choice. So for about the last 2.5 months, you'll notice 5 or 6, sometimes 7 and 8 Republicans in praying the invocation, while the rest of the Republicans stay in the caucus room at the behest of our leader. So we have a lot of problems with our leadership. We have, so when I did the when I voted no on the Democrat Speaker of the House, I was immediately approached by staff and a Republican member, Graham Filler, telling me not to do it. They're like, Jim, don't do it. They're going to take away your committees, which they did. They're going to possibly discipline your staff, and you're going to be painted as a radical nut job. This is ceremonial. And so the way we elect our speaker or our leader if for instance, if none of us voted for Speaker Tate, none of the Republicans of the 54 voted for Speaker Tate, the Democrats would have to coalesce around Tate and get all of their votes to have Joe Tate as Speaker. So you might say, well, how does this impact things going forward? Well, by allowing the Republicans to vote for the Democrat Speaker, it totally punishes those that voted against him. So it allows basically us 8 to be punished for voting against the Speaker, and all the ramifications of that going forward. No committees, really not having a voice. We're not in leadership. I could give you a lot of examples. And by the way, Leader Matt Hall seconded the nomination of Joe Tate. So we were put in a tough position right off the bat because our leader seconded his nomination. And so it was all expected that we would all vote for him. And the whole machine basically got around, hey, you need to vote for Speaker Tate. We need you all to vote for Speaker Tate. And it wasn't ceremonial. Trust me on that. So basically what it comes down to is we take the majority. The unwritten rule is the Democrats will all vote for whoever we nominate for Speaker. And we conservatives would have a very small voice in electing our next Speaker if we're in the majority, because we've got 40, 50, 55, 56 Democrats over there who are going to vote for the pick that 25 of our members or 28 of our members picked. So that's part of it. That's part of the corrupt system that causes us to not have a conservative leader. And as a result, we have a bad leader. And that's what I'm stating here today. I think that's where I want to stop and maybe allow some people to ask some questions. I know there's a few other points I want to get across, but maybe I'll get them across after we have some questions. I want to open it up for John and for Shane and for further questions.
Awesome. Well, let me interject. I know that talked about the culture of corruption in Lansing. You did mention that you're a member of the Michigan Freedom Caucus. So who's part of that group, and how are you guys trying to fight back against that culture of corruption?
So we have 9 members that are in the Freedom Caucus: Representative Neil Frisky, Representative Steve Cara, Representative Matt Maddock, Representative Angela Regas, Representative Rochelle Smith, Representative Josh Stryver, Representative Andrew Beeler, Representative Joe Fox. I think that's all 9 of them. And so as members of the Freedom Caucus, we represent a freedom and liberty perspective and a constitutional adherence perspective. So we adhere to the state and federal constitution that we took an oath to uphold. So how does that play out in the legislative process? We won't vote for corporate welfare, which you're seeing all happen. We're witnessing it right now. How does the Freedom Caucus, how do we try to influence our Republican caucuses to try to convince our members that smaller government, protecting our freedoms, protecting our liberties, lower taxes, not voting for tax increases, all the things that you can imagine that would be important to us as conservatives and as Republicans.
Hey, Jim, Hillsdale County Republican Party came up with 7 party values. The first one is Bill of Rights, because if you don't have the Bill of Rights, then you can't have anything else after that. So we got Bill of Rights, sanctity of life, limited government, less taxes, individual responsibility, balanced budgets, and I believe I got one more in there, but those are some basic ideas what a Republican is. I think you embody that. Why do you think other Republicans that are in there in your caucus, why do you think they go outside those boundaries? Because from a Republican Party standpoint, we are separate from the politician. In fact, most politicians don't even participate in their local parties. So as from a party perspective, we take all the heat from bad politicians. Let's just take Kathy Schmaltz over in Jackson for an example. She's got a 26% scorecard on conservatism. Where Jackson Republican Party is taking the heat for her poor representation. And she doesn't even really participate with them. So like, what are we supposed to do, or how are we supposed to handle that? And why do you think they go outside those boundaries?
Well, part of the reason for this call this morning is really to demonstrate where this corruption pervades our entire caucus. So there's unwitting participants, people with poor situational awareness. And then there's willing participants. And I'll leave that up to all of you to determine who you think are the willing participants. So money is the big part of this, John. So when we're all trying to get elected, our leaders are out raising money based on their leadership status. And these leadership funds, and I'll go into a lot of these leadership funds were used in very suspect ways to prevent freedom and liberty candidates from getting out of primaries. And basically, there was money spent in the primaries to help very liberal candidates get over the hump over freedom and liberty type candidates. Does that make sense? And so when you get these people that come into Lansing who just got thousands of dollars from the leader, they feel beholden to go with what the leader says. Listen, I helped you get here. And I have to admit, I got money too. And I'm trying to break out of this pattern, break out of this corruption. I'm finally saying, hey, this is corrupt. This is wrong. This is why we are in minority. This is the reason we're in the minority. So, and this whole system of this quote unquote 50-50 seats and people who are going to be more moderate, so to speak, in these 50-50 seats, I reject that whole concept. And I will say this too, many of the deep red districts in this redistricting process, many of the deep red districts have some of our most liberal Republican members in them. How that happens comes back to this process with which many of you are going to have to pay attention to, because there are really our only way to stop all of this and to stop the this progressive march for Michigan with Governor Whitmer, with a democratically elected Senate, which is going to be here for 4 years, guys. It's not changing for 4 years unless there's some other thing that we don't know is happening. The only way to stop it is the state house. If we regain majority of the state house, we can stop. We can bring it all to a grinding halt. This $80 billion budget that they're proposing, which just a few years ago was 35 billion, we can refuse to advance their money. And then we're basically in the same boat that Washington's in. A state house or a Congress that's stopping the ill-gotten gains from being funded, and bring it back to Michigan, a state House of Representatives that's saying, no, we will not spend these ridiculous amounts of money. And the day of reckoning is coming, guys. So much of our budget, so much of our state budget is federal funds. We're in big trouble 2-3 years down the line, but Governor Whitmer doesn't care about that. Who knows if she'll even be here?
Hey, Jim, you talking a lot of political language. There's probably a lot of viewers on that don't even understand what you're saying. Like, can we start with some basic, like, what is a caucus?
So our caucus is all 54 members of the Republican caucus. We caucus together. And so it's all 54 of us together. So that's the Republican caucus. And then there's a Democrat caucus.
So it's a group.
It's our group.
So meeting in a group is a caucus.
And we have a caucus leader. And he is our minority leader. They call him the minority leader caucus. The majority party, their caucus leader, is the speaker. He is the speaker of the House. Now, going back to that, John, the speaker of the House, through House rules, runs the House of Representatives. He also runs our finances. He also hires our staff, which I believe is wrong. I have a bill introduced that no staff can be fired unless the legislator over that staff agrees to it, minus any exceptions for other, public professional behavior and other things. But your staff cannot be fired unless you give the approval to it, right? They're at-will employees, but what legislator would want to see his staff fired simply for standing up and saying, I object to this? So
Hey, Jim, I was told that the Speaker of the House determines what furniture you have in your office. Really, they dictate everything. So you got a Democrat Speaker of the House right now determining who your staff is, who your furniture is, really, honestly, everything. And I was told this too, and I believe to be true, is 3 people run the state of Michigan. And that's Governor Whitmer, Senate Majority Leader, and Speaker of the House. Is that true?
Well, I would argue that one person runs the state of Michigan. The governor has taken over the legislative branch. She is controlling the legislature. Many of us will refuse to believe that, but trust me, I've observed it in the first 4 months. What she says goes. So not only that, John, but the speaker controls our allotment. So the money that we get to spend as Republicans, the Democrats control our allotment. So they determined, now they were fair with that. We did the differences in the allotment are not that great, because they're like, it would look really bad if we took and made a big disparity in the allotment. So that allotment allows us to pay our 2 staffers and our mailings and our office budget. They control all that. The speaker is the leader of the House. He is the business leader of the House. However, that's all House rules. That's not statutorily. That's not, well, the statutory might be that he's the leader of the House, but the rules that follow behind it are all rules we abide by that Republicans and Democrats have set up together. So when you go back to, have Republicans done some of these things? Yes, they have. So when Republicans acted in an unfair manner in a legislative process, the Democrats will say, well, you're just paying for what you did 6, 7, 8 years ago. And there may be some truth to that. I would say when we regain the majority, we are not going to stack the committees. And as a matter of fact, when the Democrats tell us who they want to be on committees, we're going to take what they say and put the Democrats on the committees they want to be on. That didn't happen here. And our leader was so weak that he couldn't stand up to that. He could not stand up to that. And he's continuously losing these battles because they perceive him, and they not only they perceive him, but they see him as weak, and they're just basically rolling him over every week.
Do you think the governor runs everything because Democrats control every major power seat at this point? I mean, it might be different if there was like a Republican that had some balls in the Speaker of the House position to kick back on that, or a Senate Majority Leader that's not a globalist that would kick back on that.
I think you're in essence really describing the problem we have right now. We as Republicans are not standing very strong, and we're trying to stand together. The problem with our Republican caucus are not the conservative members. That's not the problem. We're standing strong on these votes, and
Right.
we're out there protesting every week a lot of the things that Governor Whitmer is proposing. And so many of you know that we strongly objected to our leader's gun control vote. I'll use that as an example. On a very crucial gun control vote, gun safety, gun storage restrictions, our leader voted with the Democrats, voted yes on the restriction. Now they had enough votes to pass it, but now it's being called bipartisan legislation. And I've gotten letters from constituents saying, Jim, why couldn't you vote for that gun control? Your leader voted for it, and 4 of your members voted for it. So that's the kind of stuff we deal with, is that we do not have strong members, and we are continuously catering to these, I'll call them weaker members who can't stand up or won't stand up. And this corrupt system that we put in place enables them, because right now, many of you would be surprised on this call. You would say, well, surely it's the weak members that are receiving the negative attention. They're the ones that are ostracized that are not doing the right thing. It's exactly the opposite. The conservative members are getting the negative attention, and we are the ones ostracized in our caucus.
Even your speaker has a low score, I believe under 50. We continuously are let me speak as a Republican Party side. I go to a county that is maybe don't have as much balls as Hillsdale, and they're telling me that we have to still talk highly of these poor Republicans. It's a challenge. It's like we're in a catch-22. If we don't talk about the poor Republicans, how do we fix the problem?
So a big part of what I'm doing and a big part of what the Freedom Caucus is doing is trying to expose this corruption. And just to your point, John, if we don't let the grassroots, the core activists, the people that are out there that are frustrated over what's happening, like saying, why are we in the minority? We don't tell them exactly why this has happened and talk about it. I don't think people will think that, oh, well, you know what, we're going to have some differences of opinion. Differences of opinion are one thing, but when you're a leader, this is where I'm coming from. When you're a leader, I expect you to stand with 51 of your members, 50 members of your caucus. I expect if you're the leader, you're not going to be with the ones that are voting with the Dems, and especially specifically on that gun control issue. But you're absolutely right. Across the state, we have got to realize that we are in the soup we're in because we have not stood up against Democrats. We've kind of gotten weak, wishy-washy, compromised. And I did not come to Lansing to compromise on our right to bear arms. I did not come for any compromise on that. It's absolute. As a matter of fact, many of you know the state constitution is very explicit about everyone's right to bear arms. And it doesn't say everyone's right to bear arms as long as you store your gun properly, or everyone's.
There's no compromise on any of the Bill of Rights, Jim.
Absolutely.
Period. There's no question whatsoever.
Jim, so you talked about your leader, Representative Matt Hall, voting in favor of gun control. Do you think that this is done because of behind the scenes scheming with the Republicans and the Democrats, this sort of uniparty apparatus that is kind of taking form? Why do you think that? Are they well intentioned in making their votes, or is there something more sinister going on here?
Well, as I said, there's unwitting participants and there's willing participants. I believe that some truly may have voted their district. Some of them may have good intentions. I can't really fault if their true intentions were. I can't fault that. My issue as a member of the Republican legislature is, I guess, why are you here? Why are you here as a Republican? And why are you representing to your district that you're going to go and fight for Republican values, conservative values? Like, we had 2 members endorsed by Right to Life who went and voted against to repeal the 1931 law after having been endorsed by Right to Life. So their constituents believed that they were pro-life, and they went and voted against their constituency. So that's just one example. And I got to say, we're up here as members. We have fellow members that we are with every day, that you're respectful to, and that you might personally like. I mean, we may all have a lot of people that we personally like, but we disagree with their values. We disagree with their political beliefs. We disagree with their core values. It doesn't mean that we hate them. It just means that we disagree with them, and we will fight to try to regain our state, try to get our state back to what it belongs. That's where we're trying to fight this fight, and it's got to be fought in every House district. Unfortunately, there's no other way to do it.
Okay, well, I'm going to start reading some of the comments from the chat and taking questions from the chat. If anyone would like to ask a question on the Zoom call, feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you. One question is that, how does a legislator become a member of the Freedom Caucus?
So we have weekly meetings, and a legislator can apply to join the caucus, and we vote based on their voting record and based on their intentions. And we just have a simple majority vote to admit a member to the Freedom Caucus.
And Stacy asks, how do we know to trust the Freedom Caucus? Why are you guys for real?
Well, watch our votes. Number one, you need to be watching our votes. And if you look at where we are going, like the first 2 weeks of our legislative, I think it was in end of January, we were out protesting Pfizer. We've been protesting the Goshen battery plant in Big Rapids. We've been protesting the battery plant in Marshall, Michigan. Guys, this is all the Freedom Caucus, hardly any other members. Brad Paquette, who's not in the Freedom Caucus, has been with us on the Pfizer protest, on the Goshen protest. We are fighting to try to stop this liberal tide that's happening in our state. I would just say, watch the legislature closely, and you'll see the Freedom and Liberty members speaking up and voting the way that you would expect a conservative to vote.
Well,
go on.
Oh, sorry, Shane, go ahead.
No, go on. I'll ask the next question.
I mean, from the Republican Party standpoint, we have a certain level of expectations, like from Hillsdale, like I just posted in the chat, our 7 core principal values. And there are some areas you can move on, but these 7 core values are areas that we expect our politicians not to move on. Look at the Senate Majority Leader prior hand, Jason Wentworth. Jason Wentworth didn't want to touch anything election integrity. He had the full authority to go ahead and do something about election integrity. He could have went and did a forensic audit of Wayne County, for an example. Nobody's had a full forensic audit anywhere in the state of Michigan. We've done some recounts or whatever, but we've never had a forensic audit. So anybody that's like big on election integrity or that has concerns, which I know we all have concerns, but Jason Wentworth had control of that. Lee Chatfield was involved with not getting Trump electors. It's like we keep compounding these bad Speaker of the House leaders, and that represents Republicans. And now moving forward, they drag our Republican name through the mud. What are we supposed to do at the party side? How are we supposed to act, and what are we supposed to do now? If we're not supposed to fight with them and supposed to go along with that, like we can't do that. So what do we got this party for?
Well, today's message is a message of hope, because we're shedding light and bringing the sunlight to these. I mean, many of you probably remember the interview that Jocelyn Benson had, where she said she just gotten a text from Majority Speaker Lee Chatfield and it was during the election. And you're like, wait a second, what's going on? And I won't go into the whole story, but it's out there. And we know that they accused people of saying, well, you just want to overturn the election. No, we want a forensic audit. We want to audit county, and we had the ability to do that. And it's so disappointing. And I know many of you are just like, I can't believe that we couldn't get people to stand up and at least do the very basic thing, which was do their job. Let's see if this was in fact, and we know from a lot of the Pat Colbeck findings and a lot of what he's been researching that hardly any of these counties are balancing. We got all kinds of problems, and yet we had a chance to address it. Now we're in the minority. We're not going to have that opportunity that we did have. And this, again, points out to our legacy of corruption. Honestly, look at Lee Chatfield. Look at Jason Wentworth. And you look at what they didn't do. It should speak volumes to us. I mean, Jason Wentworth is now a lobbyist in Lansing, our former term limited speaker. The $20 million that he got for Faye Baydoun, highly suspicious. I mean, highly suspicious. And what is he doing? And you question these things, and they say, hey, you better shut up. You're going up against the leadership. And I'm like, I didn't come here to go along to get along. I didn't come here to support your craftiness as a politician to get money for yourself, get money for Democrats that would then in turn come back and say, hey, you're a good guy. We'll hire you as a lobbyist. This is the system in Lansing. This is you guys all have to understand how bad off it is. and how freedom and liberty type legislators are battling against this. We're fighting against this. And we've got all these people. So what I really need you to understand is we've got all these people, legislators, that are in the middle, that have gotten money from the leadership funds, that are conservative. They're conservative members, but they won't fight because they're worried about the money. They're worried about the money they got.
Also, Jim, that's our problem with MIGOP, to be honest with you as well, because they dangle the money by big donors and by people like Christina speaking up against this stuff as well. We lose the big money donors, and it makes it harder for our party to operate. And also, our party's responsible for these politicians. We have individual responsibility as one of the core values. I'm not responsible, Jim, if you go out and vote against guns. I'm sorry, I just can't be responsible for that. You are responsible for that. And so, but for some reason, in a public eye or in a public viewing, they have tricked the public into blaming the Republican Party as a whole. And that's not the case. So Christina's doing a excellent job. She doesn't have the big donors coming in because she's speaking out against some of this corruption.
Well, and if you look at this corrupt legacy that we're under right now, I truly believe that a lot of the big donors believe in constitutional conservatism. They believe in freedom and liberty. However, if you look at the way the system has been structured, at the very top, the people who want to, the self-aggrandizers, the people who want to collect big bucks for themselves, have really corralled these donors and said, listen, we're the guys you need to talk to.
Mike Sharkey?
Don't talk to those crazy conservatives. They're just going to get us permanently in the minority because they're so fringe. They're so far out on the radical right. I've heard this so many times in my first 4 months, and we're not radical. We are for the working guy. We are for working families. We are for the average American out there who is struggling under the weight of this inflation, the weight of this taxation, the weight of an onerous government that tells them everything that they need to do. I mean, if anybody ever saw it, look at what's going on in the last 4 months. So I will tell you, it's a very small group of people. And if everybody understands this, they don't represent a lot of voters, honestly. It is a very small amount of people. And I will tell you this, Southern Michigan, Southeastern Michigan, and Southern Michigan is ground zero for the battle. If you look at where our population is, look at the 8, 9, 10 counties around us. It is ground zero. Truly, the population of the state of Michigan is in the southeast corner. The Republican areas up to the north, we'll win. We're going to win those. The Republican areas in West Michigan, we're going to win those, no problem. The battleground is Monroe, Hillsdale, Lenawee, Washtenaw, Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, Livingston, St. Clair. It's all those counties where everybody lives. And yet we're hamstrung to kind of get control and say, hey guys, if you're gonna hold this money over us, we're gonna go around you. We're gonna go to your people and say, listen, do you believe in constitutional principles? Do you believe in conservative values? Then you need to put your money with the conservatives and stop this corrupt system. You've got Rick Johnson, Lee Chatfield, Jason Wentworth. You've got a legacy of corruption. Okay. You've got, and when I mention Jason Wentworth, I'm mentioning specifically his award of the $20 million to Faye Baydoun. I mean, it's absolutely outlandish that we would give $20 million to a single person, one person, in an office out of her house with a brand new corporation, brand new nonprofit corporation. I've never seen anything like that in my life in Michigan, but we do it as Republicans. I'm trying to get everybody to understand, these were Republicans that did this. These were not Democrats. These were Republicans. So our brand is tarnished, and we're all tarnished by it unless we reject their leadership and say, you don't represent us. We are constitutional conservative Republicans, and we reject your leadership. And I'm just wondering, how might this have been different if under Lee Chatfield, 34 to 40 conservatives would have rose up and said, we're removing Lee Chatfield as the Speaker of the House. We are taking him out. He does not deserve to be our leader anymore. So this is the point I'm trying to make. These people stayed silent. Some of them were willing participants. Some of them were worried about their money. And this continues. How long are we going to continue this as Republicans?
Hey, Shane, why don't we jump on some questions in the chat? I see a bunch of them coming up.
Okay, I want to interject one thing before that. James, so, you're talking about we want to have a message of hope that there is, optimism that we should get involved. Can you talk a little bit about your race and how you won in a downriver Wayne County district that had been Democrat for so long, and talk about how you were able to kind of grow the movement, bring over people to vote from Democrats to Republicans, and beat a leftist Democrat in your area?
Well, I will start out by saying that I have more independents in my district than any other district in the state of Michigan. 45% of my district identify as independents. So I have a very small self-identification of Republicans and Democrats. So I was 8.5% over Tudor Dixon in the vote. So in other words, I had 8.5% more votes than Tudor Dixon. That usually never happens. It's usually always the races down the line get less votes than the governor's race. So we outperformed the governor's race, our Republican candidate for governor, by almost 10%. And we did that with a conservative message, a pro-life, pro-family, pro-working guy, low taxes message. And that resonates. I believe that resonates with the people of Michigan. I really think we're missing the boat if we don't go out there and have that, just like John said, promise that you're going to stay true to your core principles. And those are constitutional principles. And people will believe in you and vote for you. If they perceive you as wishy-washy or somebody that's going to go along to get along, they're like, why don't I just elect a Democrat, or elect, it really doesn't, or they'll sit out the election. I believe they'll just not vote. So we were able to get more people to come out to vote for our campaign than other places in the state.
And just take some questions from the chat. James Danley asks, why wasn't the $20 million given away by Wentworth? Why was that not voted on by every legislator?
It was voted on, and the Democrats all voted for it. But a lot of times what you have to understand in these supplemental, apologize, I'm just plugging my phone in here. In these supplementals, that there's money tied up in.
Before you jump into to explain what a supplemental is.
So it's a big bill with a lot of money in it, and you get a chance to vote on the whole bill. And you probably are aware of this with earmarks in Washington. There's these little expenditures tucked away in this legislation, and you have to vote for the entire bill. You don't get to, you either vote down or up. And so they tuck these expenditures into these omnibus large bills that are supplements to another bill, and they get passed, and then the governor signs them. And it happens in Washington. It happens in Michigan. You're going to witness it happening probably in the next 2 months. Many of you know that we have a $9 billion surplus in the state of Michigan. The Democrats are giving money away like wild banshees. They're giving money away to China. And I can't restate this enough. We didn't get a chance to vote specifically on those items. They put the money into the SOAR fund and into MEDC, and then they divvy up the money. Now, a lot of those will come back through committee where you'll get a chance to vote on a specific expenditure, but a lot of them are tied up in large bills with multiple expenditures in the budget. So that's how it happens. It's kind of deep in the weeds. I apologize for not having a little more specifics on how
I give an example, Jim. Hillsdale wrote a letter to Tim Walberg, our congressman, a while back when we first took our seats, because there was $70 million sent out to Pakistan for gender studies in the first stimulus package. So when they first gave out that stimulus money a couple of years ago, $70 million went to Pakistan for gender studies. Well, we wrote a letter to Tim Walberg that was pretty hard, saying we don't approve of that. There's no good reason. There's not a single bill that's good enough to send $70 million to Pakistan for gender studies. So we said, we didn't like it, and you better communicate with the other counties that you represent and probably test the waters before you go ahead and vote on for something like this. I know his intentions were probably good of getting the stimulus money out, but the intentions bad. These bad intentions are paving the road to hell. Really, good intentions pave the road to hell, and that's really what's going on here. There's a lot of good intentions in a lot of these bills, but there's so much bad stuff in these bills.
And again, go back to what I'm saying about this systemic corruption. Members will be bought off, convinced to vote for certain budget items because it's for their district. So it's good for them, and they're going to be able to raise money based on that. They're going to be able to go out and get donations based on that. So if anyone is that naive to think that these Chinese battery plants are not repayment for campaign donations, we're really looking in the wrong place. This money that we're giving away, this massive amount of money that we're giving away, and it's in the billions, guys. It's not small dollars. It's all of these organizations and corporations that have bought favor with Democrats and some Republicans. And I've gone through the campaign reports of many of my colleagues, and many of them have gotten money from some of the very groups I'm fighting right now. So I know that they're not going to be with me on certain issues because they've taken large amounts of money from Republic Services or T-Mobile or Pfizer. And when you take large amounts of money from them, then you're silent. And I think, John, this is your point. When you take large amounts of money and then you vote for this large package, we can only assume that you voted because of the donations. And you didn't stand up and say, listen, I'm voting against this package because it has $1.8 billion for Ford Motor Company to build a Chinese battery plant in Marshall, Michigan. And we all voted against it. We got one Republican member who swung with the Democrats, and the Democrats lost one member that would not vote for corporate welfare. But lo and behold, they got a Republican to vote and they passed it. That's
also,
what we're up.
Also, Jim, like, and I'm not taking a shot at my state rep because my state rep's doing a good job right now, or a fairly good job. Andrew Fink, I did run a candidate against him last time. Now he's kind of a jerk towards the Hillsdale County Republican Party, but I'm not going to take shots necessarily at him on a very negative level. But he took in his campaign finance, I saw that Pfizer gave him $500. Now, I know, as you know, in a state rep race, $500 ain't nothing. I mean, you're talking about spending $100,000 on a race. So, but I don't see him out protesting Pfizer as well. So it makes me wonder, why would he not protest Pfizer? They're using he's supposedly pro-life, and Pfizer uses the baby cells and stuff like that, so dead baby cells. So why is he not protesting Pfizer?
Well, I can speak to this. All right, so to answer your question, the Freedom Caucus members are the people fighting. We are the ones out fighting, and we're doing more than just fighting in the legislature. We're out there on the street, and John, I know you were there when we were at Pfizer. We've invited, anyone can come along when we do our protests. And I feel like we're just protesters now, not legislators. But in specifics to certain members, and I have a lot of respect for Andrew Fink. I really do. He's one of my probably one of my favorite colleagues. He sits in a desk right in front of me, and he's a good family guy. I believe he's conservative.
Me too.
My frustration, if I could describe it as that, because I'm not frustrated, I'm emboldened and engaged, but my frustration on the side of the members in the middle is, why are you not speaking up? Why were not all 49 or 48 of us that voted against gun control not in our leader's office after that vote, either demanding his resignation or telling him in no uncertain terms that was a horrible vote to join with the Democrats in that vote. If our right to bear arms is infringed or taken away, we're in trouble as a society. It's all on the law. We're attacking law-abiding citizens. But getting back to your point about all of these people who are on this call, the House districts that you're in, you really need to do some research on your member and find out, all right, where are you at? Where are you at when it comes to issues like this systemic corruption? Will you stand against it? Will you stand against the corrupt system that you're involved in? Or are you going to go along with it? And they say, well, what do you mean? And they're like, are you going to vote for the Democrat speaker? If the Democrats get 56 seats or 57 seats, are you going to vote for the Democrat speaker? Or even questions of like, who do you coalesce with? Why are you not a member of the Freedom Caucus? Right? I mean, we want to be somewhat careful with the Freedom Caucus. We don't want to have a bunch of people that vote at 50% and below in the Freedom Caucus. That really they don't share our values. They don't share our beliefs. And I know we have friends, we have colleagues, we have coworkers that don't always share our beliefs. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't go out to dinner with these people. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't go to their birthday party. It doesn't mean that we would be a jerk to them. I really want to be clear about that. I mean, I'm a Christian. I believe the universal love of all people covers everything here. However, to expect us to support them and support their leadership position and to support them in what they're doing to our state, that's a whole nother story. And that's where I can't abide by that. I cannot, as a Republican and as a conservative, I have 8 children, I have 14 grandchildren. If we don't save our state in the next 2 to 4 years, I'm sure all of you have been talking to people who are saying, we're thinking about leaving Michigan. We're buying some property in Tennessee. Hey, we just changed our residency to Florida. We're going to have a house in Michigan that we come to in the summer, but we are permanent residents of Florida. And so all of you have heard these stories. It's not good.
So there was a question asked, how do you find some of this stuff? Like how do you find campaign finance? Secretary of State, you go to you can Google this, SOS campaign finance, and you can type in your politician's campaign and you'll be able to find that pretty easy, actually. I don't know, Shane, if we could put it in a link after the show or what, if there's a way to do that, but it's pretty easy to find.
Yeah, there's also a website, mcfn.org, that compiles a lot of that information, follow the money type site where you can see, especially with all your state reps and state senators, who is funding them. And another point I just wanted to add is that you talk about, a lot of the bad Republicans, the Republicans who don't live up to their oath and what were elected to do by their constituents. Well, nowadays, if you look at the Republican Party at the local, the county, the district, the state level, it's almost all run by patriots. So the idea that a county party or a district party could potentially censure one of these bad Republicans, and then there's a huge activist base that might be willing to support a primary challenger. So this is how we can influence the process. This is how, this is the hope that we're given to people. If we can kind of get out of our sphere of influence, get out there, hit doors, recruit candidates, stop the circular firing squad among the grassroots, there is a lot of hope for what can be done in the future, just in this upcoming election cycle.
You mentioned censure, Shane. This is an area that I'm familiar with, and you got to be, we're in a stage of time in politics where censoring is starting to become more the norm. And we're getting it from all sides, that we're infighting, that we're losing money from the donors because of stuff like this. Again, going back when I was talking to Jim, is what are we supposed to do? Someone like Kathy Schmaltz that's actually showing really poor results. Jackson County, that's been saying, well, we don't want to be like Hillsdale because we censored Shirky, and look at the problems that Hillsdale's running into with all the Shirky friendlies that are suing all of us. But now they're talking about censoring Kathy Schmaltz. Now they're coming to us for advice. The same thing for like Joe Bellino, Jim, over there in Monroe, for on the Senate side, he's showing an 8% scorecard. That's pretty sad. And I know he's doing better, but I think even just the the pressure of him knowing that Monroe is talking about censure, he's actually starting to vote a lot better. And I think that's actually the job. That's our job, is to apply that pressure. A lot of people don't, they're saying that we shouldn't make that public because it hurts the Republican brand. I'm thinking the 8% scorecard hurts our brand. So like, what are we supposed to do? Now his scorecard's going up. I really do think censoring or rebuke, I think Berrien County is talking about changing the word from censure to rebuke, because there's a lot of word games played here. What is a censure? Yeah, censure, there's a lot of things that what a censure is, but rebuking people, I think there's different ways of doing this. I think we're getting clever at this and getting better at this and communicating and having the public perception of this. It's a learning curve for all of us. And Jim, I just want to say thank you for standing up for conservatism and standing up for the principles of the Republican Party that we need to get injected into. And Shane, thank you for having Jim on. Jim called me, I think we were talking to about 2 a.m. I said, let's get some of this out, because a lot of people don't know what the Speaker of the House is. They got so much authority that we need to decentralize that. I mean, Matt Maddox tried to get Speaker of the House to do some of that, but a lot of people didn't trust the Maddox for whatever reason. But that was one of his major goals, was to decentralize that position. And his number one goal was to get a forensic audit of Wayne County. So we need to get conservative members in office in Speaker of the House position. And be honest with you, in my opinion, and Jim said, and I think it was Jim, it might've been you, Shane, for having conservative control of power, the easiest way for us to do this is through that position, the Speaker of the House. So state reps, electing conservative state reps.
John, let me say too, this really speaks to the whole essence of this call. We've concentrated way too much power in one person or a few people. And what did we expect out of that? That it would be good for conservative Republican principles? Absolutely not. It is totally blown up in our faces, and we've elected people that have gotten us in trouble and totally ruined our brand. And now we're dealing with the ramifications of that. And I just go back to, again, a rebuke, a censure. How many people so we have a public letter, 5 of the Freedom Caucus members have a public letter rebuking our leader on his gun control vote. How many people will go to their rep and say, I would like you to publicly rebuke the leader on the gun control vote? Publicly, in writing, rebuke the leader. And I will tell you this, I offered it to the entire conservative portion of our caucus. I said, would you like to participate in a public rebuke of our leader over his gun control vote? Many of you probably are not shocked that they were nervous, worried about their staff. Again, the same corruption of systemic corruption. We're talking about a corrupt system here, folks. People who are participating in it may or may not fall into that category. But if you're participating in it and you don't reject it, I'm going back to Lee Chatfield again. If you participated in the system under Lee Chatfield, how can you not be painted as corrupt? By being silent, not standing up? I mean, there's so many examples I think we could talk about on this call of people who stay silent or don't stand up. And they're like, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you get up and say, hey, this is going on? All of the grassroots people were saying, hey, they put cardboard over the class. They locked us out. And we did nothing for them. We didn't stand up. We just were silent. And we said, oh, some of these people are kind of crazy. It's like, really, the crazy people are the people that are not saying anything. They're like, hey, you're in a system, you're participating in it, and we're in the minority now. We've got a Democrat governor, a Democrat Senate, a Democrat Democrat House, to the percentage of which will shock a lot of people, all under people that have participated in a corrupt system and have ruined the conservative brand. They've ruined the Republican brand. And I'm afraid that if we don't change it, if we don't change this system and change this culture, we can relegate ourselves to permanent minority status in this state. If we don't, but I'm hopeful. I see what's going on in Monroe County, in Lenawee County, in Hillsdale County. I even see I'm really gratified by what's going on in Wayne County. I cannot believe how many good, conservative, constitutionally principled people are rising up in Wayne County. And we are going to win the battle, I think, in some of these places, maybe not in House districts, but you're going to see numbers flipping in Wayne County. And I know that I'm hopeful for this, especially in the downriver area, because these people are going to say, I did not elect Jamie Churches or Reggie Miller to go and take away my gun rights. And I didn't think that they were that radical. And now I'm upset. So what we're seeing is a system that's completely broken. When I knocked on my doors, I said, our political system is completely broken, both at the federal level and at the state level. And I got almost 80 to 90% agreement from Democrats and Republicans and independents. And so when we talked about the fact that the system is broken, they say, Jim, how do you fix the system? And I said, this is a very complex process. You start by fixing the system by getting the right people in there. And some people will say, well, hey, I got to get elected to fix the system. So elect me because I'll go in and fix the system. But truly, you have to elect people that will truly go in and fix the system. And I have said to many people, this system we have in Lansing is not salvageable. It needs to be blown up and start over again. And I know that's a really harsh way of putting it, but we have got to start over with our conservative principles in Lansing. We've got to start over in how we pick leaders and how we get people into the leadership positions and how we, even our state party, we've seen this transformation in our state party. We basically have rejected this whole go along to get along theory, right? We've said, no, we don't want to do that. We're going to stop doing that. Well, I'm telling everybody today, we have to stop this go along to get along system where we give $20 million to Faye Bay-Dune, or we give money to Gretchen Whitmer's. We say, go ahead and do this because I got a deal on the side here with, I'm going to get some money on the side here. And this is going to be good for me. But it's not good for the Republican Party. And it's certainly not good for the state of Michigan. We have really damaged the state of Michigan. And I'm here to say that Republicans have participated in it. We have caused a lot of this damage to our state by not standing up, by putting in Republicans who have participated in this system and not pulling them back out and saying, hey, wait a second. We got big concerns with the way this whole place is running.
So, Jim, it takes more than just a vote, is what you're saying. So, like, let's just take, and we keep mentioning Monroe, Lenawee, and Hillsdale, because this is my district and this is your area as well, sort of. And so someone like Dale Zorn, his voting scorecard is at 100%. It's great. Thank you, Dale, for having that scorecard. But it takes more than having that scorecard at 100%. Same with like Andrew Fink. It takes more than that. You need to speak up against the corruption that you're speaking about, right?
Well, give credit where credit's due. Good voting is good voting. You did, John. I mean, I absolutely love my members that have those upper 95 to 100% voting records. I mean, gosh, always praise them for that, right? And then tell them, why would you put people into leadership, or why would you participate in the system that is giving credence to this compromise on core principles that Republicans are giving away huge amounts of our political capital on gun rights, on right to life, on corporate welfare, on Elliot Larson. Why are we creating so many special classes of people? There's really only one class of person, a human person. You know, we don't need to have all these specialized classes and specific favorable classes. We just need to get back to our core principles of our U.S. Constitution and our state constitution, which we're not using very much right now. And I think all of us realize that if we should be in court right now on this corporate welfare. The Michigan Constitution prohibits taxpayer dollars going to a private company. But people will say, well, you know what? We can't do anything about it because we got a Democrat Supreme Court, a governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General. We can't do anything about it. So this is what I'm coming back to you on is we have got to fight this battle at the grassroots, at county by county. Honestly, John, you put it very well. Take every county and bring it back to constitutional conservatism, and we win this battle county by county. Yes, we've got some problems in the populated areas as Republicans. We're not doing very well in Wayne, in Ingham, in Kalamazoo, in Genesee County. We're not doing very well in these populated counties. And I come back to, why are we not doing well? Is it because the brand of republicanism that we're presenting to these people seems like, oh, you guys are a bunch of rich, corrupt guys? I mean, I think that's a very telling statement, that a person working, a low-income person working who just lost their gun rights and has no way to fight it in the legal system, like, I don't have a lot of money. So if they come and take my guns, I have no way to fight this. So thank you, Republicans, for going along on that. A lot of things that we are going along on, we are hurting the working guy. We are hurting that inner city working guy. So until we bring a message of hope to people that are poor and to people that are fighting to get up in the ladder, up the economic ladder, I don't think that the Democrat message is helping those people. I don't think it's a message of hope. If you're poor, their message is get on governmental assistance. The government will help you with everything. The Republican message is we will help you with everything to get out of that, to break out of that cycle. We don't get that message out very well because everybody says, well, you know, we have to go along on some of this stuff. I think we should be voting down this state budget. Every member of the Republican Party should be voting no on this state budget.
So
We
Jim,
have a question. Oh, we actually have a question from Mark Smith. So I'm going to ask him to unmute so he can ask his question. Mark, you there? All right, John, you want to go into
Yeah. Hey, thanks. Just a quick comment. I think number one, is this going to be something you will do again? Because the information is very powerful and knowledge is power. So I'd like to see a follow-up. Number two, you mentioned exactly what's going on. Benzie County has turned itself completely around. We have turned our party back to a constitutional driven bunch of precinct delegates. And we have watched as this We the People precinct delegate army has flipped the state administration on its head. So, you know, Jim, stay strong. We're in this fight with you. We're a small county, but you have a lot of friends. If we can just get access to this information on a regular basis, we'll do what we can up here for you. So thanks for everything you guys are doing.
Thank you, Mark.
Excellent.
I was gonna say, Jim, I went over to Lenawee last month and Dale Zorn was there. And what you said about Matt Hall, that was the question I asked him. Why are you electing someone like Matt Hall as your leadership? Why are you accepting this? And it was funny because Lenawee's great. I love Lenawee and they're my friends. And it's funny because I don't know if they have a hard time bringing the challenging questions or not, but all the chairs turned towards Dale. It was like compelling in the room, and Dale didn't really have a good reason why he was accepting Matt Hall as the leadership. He just didn't have the answer. I think we need to have county parties bring those challenging questions to their state reps. Why are you guys participating in this bad behavior?
Well, and going back to my earlier point, if each and every county would ask their legislator, will you be a vote for a Democrat speaker, and get them on record on that? Will you vote for a Democrat speaker if they are in the majority? And I'm hoping that's not the case, right? I'm hoping that's not going to be the case. And then ask them more specific questions about, will you support Freedom Caucus principles? Will you support constitutional principles, freedom and liberty principles? And then why will you ostracize, or shouldn't say why, or will you stand with the constitutional conservatives when they're ostracized by leadership, when they are marginalized and ostracized? This is where we're at. And again, my message is a message of hope. This is getting out to people about how bad it is. And we're going to make a change. And there are a lot of people, trust me, there are a lot of influenceable people in the middle that are afraid. They are fearful. And the main thing they're fearful of is getting reelected. They're fearful of getting reelected, and they're fearful of having money. So what I will say to you, and this is not supposed to be some self-serving statement, be very careful where you donate your money for political purposes. And I know many of you are. And go and lobby some of the people that you know and trust, that you know are good conservative people, and say, hold on, time out. Let's talk about how you're spending your money for your political donations. We have got to get more constitutional conservatives into the state legislature, and specifically into the state house. This is why we're losing, guys. This is why we're losing majority in our state. We are going along to get along, and we're compromising on core principles. We can compromise on things like urban agriculture. That's not a partisan issue. We can compromise on things like injection well drilling in Romulus. That's not a partisan issue. Injecting waste into Romulus. We can compromise on 5G towers on schools. That's not a partisan issue. It really shouldn't be. But when you've taken thousands of dollars from Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, now you're like, well, I can't vote against that tower bill that you have, Jim, because I've taken a lot of money from those corporations, and they're expecting me to stand strong for the money they gave me. It's like, okay, well, go ahead and radiate a bunch of children for your money. Good luck. And we as Republicans now look bad again, because we do not care about the person out there. Like I meet so many people day in and day out. They're like, please go and fight for us. Well, this call today is about me trying to fight for all of you.
So it's not all dire, Jim. I mean, obviously, from a county party's perspective, we got some politicians that are voting their vote scorecards at 100%. That's great. We got county parties, as Mark was on. Well over half of the counties in the state of Michigan have flipped forward and taken these steps to move towards a more principle-based system. So it's not all dire gloom and gloom. We are losing these big races, and it's a transitional period. We do have a state party that's broke, if you will. We got this transitional period. We got some learning curve to do here. It's actually an exciting time to help build. If you want to build, this is actually a good time to get in. So I encourage people to get in and start building. If we can get some of this paranoia out of the party, if we can get some of the tick for tack stuff out of the party from a county party and a state party's perspective, I think we will be a well-oiled machine coming in 24, 26, 28, because elections are cycles. I've been in this long enough to see how this works. I came in hot and heavy, just like the rest of the grassroots, and I got a little bit more wisdom now. I just, Shane, I know we got a lot of questions. I didn't know how long you wanted this show to go for.
Oh, we're gonna stop at 11. I'll take a few more from the chat, but I wanted to also add that yes, it takes a lot of money to get elected as a governor or U.S. Senate, U.S. Congress, but not necessarily for state house. All you need is a candidate who is strong with the right message, who presents well, who's willing to knock tons of doors and go do the actual work, put up a little bit of money themselves, and then if you have a team around them of a dozen or so people who will do all the work that's needed, put on events, walk doors themselves and be dedicated and focused, then you can win. You can win even if you're drastically overfunded. The opponent's drastically overfunded compared to you. So this can be done. We have the numbers. We have the will. So we just have to.
Jonathan Lindsay is a good example of that, Shane. I mean, look at he beat Kim Lasada. He had a team of people, core people working for him. He had a decent amount of money to run, self-funding. He's a prime example. Jim DeSana is a prime example of that. These seats are winnable.
I won my seat despite being outspent like 5-1. And in the primary, I had a fairly liberal Republican outspend me like 4-1 and beat him 64% to 24%. So there was 2 other candidates that had 5%. So a conservative message wins, guys. Don't ever lose heart about that. A good conservative message wins every time, even in inner city areas. So I have an urban part of my district, and I have a rural part of my district. I did extremely well, I'll be honest, in the rural part, but I got more votes in the urban part than any Republican has ever gotten in the modern history of our state. Republicans were running in the 30 percentile in Taylor, and I was at 45%, 15% higher in an urban area because my message was protect your liberties, low taxes, protect your basic rights. And that resonated with people. And I think that we're missing the boat if we somehow say, hey, you guys just all need to tone it down and let these experienced politicians run your state. I have a feeling where they're running our state to. You have a question? You said you might have had a question from the chat, Shane. I'd be glad to take another one.
Yes. So we had one who asked, is there, what's the deal with corporate welfare? How does it pass without getting a 2/3 approval? And this kind of has to deal with, how the Constitution is written, state constitution, and how it's sidestepped by our lawmakers.
So yeah, I misspoke. I misstated that earlier. It's a 2/3 vote required by our Constitution. And why we are not in court? Why are we not in court on that? We basically just throw the Constitution aside, federally and in the state, and nobody challenges it. So this is where we're at. Many of you know that in order for the Constitution to be enforced, we have to have courts to enforce it. And we as legislators are not standing up and going into court and saying, listen, this is unconstitutional. And people will look at you and say, gosh, how do we change this? You change by changing your legislators. Get conservative legislators into the state legislature. And I saw some comments. It is, you know what? Shut off the spigot that is their funding. We control all the funding. And that's what's happening in Washington. It's got to start there. Stop the funding, and then also stop all these other crazy practices that politicians are really good at.
Also, Jim, you didn't touch on it, is it's really important to elect judges. So like courts are corrupted just as much as anything else anymore. And if you got judges that are emotionally judging on things, if you will, it's a challenge. We got to get good judges in there and vote on our judge on the rule of law. And so judges are just as important as a lawmaker at this point.
And our Supreme Court is so important, right? Our Michigan Supreme Court, people have lost sight of that. But let's start with the legislature, because I believe we can write laws that will really put the judges on record as saying, nope, this is the law, this is the Constitution. No matter what my personal views are, this is the Constitution, this is the law. Michigan, you must ask for voter ID at the polling place. This is the law. They can't go against that, right? We don't write laws very well. And even when we're in Republican majorities, we don't do what we should do. And this is the legacy that we're leaving and this is what we're hoping to overcome with what's going on right now. It's very hopeful, John. I mean, it's happening all over our state. People are waking up. They're saying, listen, I now know what our problem is. Once you define the problem, you can solve it. We didn't know what our problem was before a year ago.
Damn near my whole district has flipped forward. So we are working. Monroe's working. Lenaway's working. Hillsdale's working. Jackson's working. We're all working across the Berrien's working. Cass. They're all working.
Mm-hmm.
And so before we wrap up, just any last minute questions, put them in the chat right now. You can go to repdesana.com, repdesana.com, and go support the representative. He's going to need the support, because when you go against the powers that be, there are usually some repercussions. So rally around him, give him your support, and let other people know as well. We have Paula Nacky asking to unmute, so you can do your question.
Okay. James, there was a rep at our protest in Romulus, other than you, who I asked why they are not part of the Freedom Caucus, because I thought they were very constitutional, very that type of, Freedom Caucus person. And you know who I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They said to me that they don't want to be told how to vote. And my understanding is a caucus is where you meet like-minded people, you caucus together, you talk about where to go, but you don't necessarily have to vote the same way. Although you should be if you have the same views and the same beliefs. Can you kind of maybe just so I'm understanding, so I can approach this in a different way with them?
Sure. So in the Freedom Caucus, we have critical votes. And when we identify a critical vote, we expect our entire caucus to vote that way. Now, obviously, not every vote is a critical vote. In fact, probably even, maybe not even 50% are. But when we come down to gun control, for example, we expect every one of our members to vote against gun control. That's why you're in the Freedom Caucus. Like John said, protecting the Bill of Rights, protecting our basic constitutional rights. We're always going to fall on, we need to vote for this way, guys. Now, if somebody votes disparate from the Freedom Caucus, who's a member of the Freedom Caucus, it doesn't mean that they're not in. It just means that they may have a different opinion on this particular vote. We do not tell people how to vote. As a matter of fact, in all fairness, even our caucus doesn't do that. However, what I would like to say is, if you're a Republican and you're conservative and you're a constitutional principled person, when you come into this caucus, you are on the core principles like gun control. I keep coming back to that, or taxation. Like, Republicans don't vote for higher taxes, right? Republicans vote to try to bring government down and smaller. We need a much smaller state government. We're going to be at $80 billion. So the Freedom Caucus is going to stand and say, we need to get this government smaller. So you're not going to join the Freedom Caucus if you believe that $80 billion is a good budget number. So you need to ask your reps, if you truly believe in the principles of the Freedom Caucus, then you can become a supporting member. You can come to our meetings. Everybody is invited to our meetings. We do not kick anybody out of our meetings that wants to know more about our meetings. I will tell you that the Freedom Caucus is really truly going to be where we lead ourselves out of this mess. It's not, and we have a conservative caucus too, and I'll give credit to those members. However, we have got a big problem here, folks, and we've really defined it today. And I think we all know what we need to do.